Hi, this is Nicole Rivera, and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast. For my listeners in the States, I want to say happy Thanksgiving. I wanted to put the show on pause this week since it is a national holiday and I will be celebrating with family. But I didn't want to leave anybody in the lurch that might just be in the habit of putting on the podcast early in the morning and maybe wanted to listen over getting ready for the day, whether it's preparing your meal or just getting ready to spend time with family. So what I wanted to share with you, rather than continue on with the Happy Campers interviews this week, I'm putting that on pause and giving you a bit of a bonus episode, introducing you to something that I officially launched last week. I did mention it in last week's episode. I have started a brand new newsletter Substack called Story Hoarder. And I'm just going to read for you the first story that I released last week. I'm going to read my introduction of what is Story Hoarder and let you know that tomorrow on Friday there will be a new story. So let's begin with what is Story Hoarder. Welcome to the Story Hoarder Substack, one writer's confession and absolution wrapped up in one neat little package. I am a story hoarder. I have been writing for a lifetime, sharing stories with a precious few. This Substack is an effort to change that. While I have been a writer my entire life, I only began to take that role seriously in the last 10 years. At the beginning of that journey, nearly all of my writing was public. I was a blogger, therefore my creations were my content. It made sense to me to always be sharing. However, somewhere along the line, someone told me that none of the things I had, quote, published on my personal blog would ever be able to be published in print. It was a half-truth. I turned it into my law. Naivete plus internet information. When does it not turn to extremism? Anyway, that is how I think my story hoarding truly began. How I ended up spending so much time and effort crafting and revising stories, but never truly sharing them. I was lit up in the process of creation and revision, slowed down, and frankly uninterested in the process for submission. It seems ridiculous to many people, but I became quite content with a handful of readers. If I were coaching a writer who told me this, I would remind them that publication does not always have to be the end goal for a writer, that each writer and person can define success for themselves. I'd say something like, if you're not interested in making a living off your writing, and this is where your joy comes from, then you are all good to continue on this path. And they would be. But would I? Did you pick up on that quote, if I were coaching a writer thing I dropped in that last paragraph? Yeah, that's actually a thing I do. You see, in addition to being a writer, I am also a coach for writers in the Stop Writing Alone community, and I am the host of the Stop Writing Alone podcast. I run writing community intensives called the Happy Campers Club, where I show up to daily live Zoom calls working with writers as they use the time to complete their respective works in progress. I host all different kinds of events for writers. In short, I'm running around this big blue marble acting like some sort of authority in the field of writing. This is where the story hoarding becomes an issue. Who is Nicole Rivera to tell me about writing, someone might ask? That would be a great question. I hope what follows here at Story Hoarder, combined with my presence on YouTube and the Stop Writing Alone podcast, can answer that question in a more complete way. However, I also hope Story Hoarder becomes its own entity of entertainment and escape for whoever needs it. Story is my own personal salve for all types of wounds. Story also serves as a magical spice that makes all of life taste better. I love story. I love imagining it, writing it, consuming it in various mediums, and talking about it whenever possible. I'm sorry I was depriving you of my stories for so long. I hope you enjoy them, find something to talk about in them, perhaps can be healed by them, or walk away thinking, if she can do that, so can I. Because that's true. You can. And when you do, I hope you won't turn out to be a story hoarder like me. So that's my basic intro. I also add in there a bullet point list of things that you can expect on Story Hoarder, and that's short stories in various genres, flash and microfiction, stories from the NYC Midnight Contests, stories from the 52 Stories in 52 Weeks Challenge, excerpts and chapters from my novel-length fiction, creative nonfiction or personal essay, occasional brief descriptions of the prompts or ideas that inspired the stories, and whatever the readers inspire me to share next. I'm looking to really just get my stories out there. And it is true what I wrote there, that I have been really happy just writing and getting feedback from the writers in the community that I work with and friends and family that have read stories. But I do recognize that as somebody who is sitting here on Stop Writing Alone, it's kind of important for the world at large to see my writing. So in the past year, some of you may remember that my 2021 goal was 52 submissions in 52 weeks. And I really thought that that was going to be my way to get my writing out there in order to bridge this gap. The problem is that, and those of you who are on the submission path know this, the process to submission, that whole, finding the right venue and querying or submitting or applying to contests and all of this is very time consuming. And what I was finding is that I was trading that time with time in the Happy Campers community or showing up to the YouTube or quite frankly, just showing up to my family. And it wasn't the trade-off that I wanted to do. So I recognize that I'm running a huge risk now by putting out some of my best stories for free on this Story Hoarder Substack, and potentially I'm taking away their ability to be published in, a literary magazine. But I also know that it has been nearly a year and I have not sat to put in the time. I haven't traded the time from something else to do the submission process. So the stories will go out. I still hope to find a balance in figuring out where that submission process fits in my schedule. But this year, my primary goal was to finish up the Stop Writing Alone book, and I didn't want to take away from that. So I'm trying to finish that up this year. I'm almost done with my revision. That was my NaNoWriMo project. And in the meantime, the idea of this Story Hoarder just lit me up. It came up in a Happy Campers meeting. A couple of the writers there said, Nicole, you're a really great writer, but nobody knows about it. And I was like, all right, forget it. I'm just starting to put my writing out there. Because even my husband's getting frustrated. Every time I say, should I try to put my story here or there? He's like, just get your stories out there already. So that's what I'm doing. And here is the first story that was posted last week. If you haven't already subscribed or checked it out, it's called Poor People Food. This was actually written during Tammy Brightweiser's fabulous flash fiction course. So the only people that got to see or read this story before me putting it on Substack last week were the participants in the course. So it was a fun share. And I'm going to read it to you now. And if you are interested in reading more of my fiction, you can go to storyhoarder.substack.com. And at this point, I'm going to be releasing a new story every single Friday. And this is a flash fiction piece, as I said, so it's about a 2-minute read. I think this week's story might be a little bit longer. So, Poor People Food by Nicole Rivera. Does anybody make that anymore? Nicola asked. Nah, that's poor people food, Brian said. Doesn't mean it wasn't delicious, though. And anyway, you tell me one amazing culture-defining food that didn't start out as poor people food. Nicola took one bite out of her taco, then brandished it in the air as her proof. Yeah, I hear you. But there's a difference when it ain't your culture. Like it's exotic or some shit. So it don't feel poor. Brian sat back into his chair, lifting his foot up onto the seat so he could dangle his arm over his knee like he was doing some lean back in a cruiser down the 110. Nicola laughed. She thought Brian was good looking and a good time, but if she couldn't expand his horizons past the boundaries of their hood, she was going to have to put a hard stop to the time they spent together before it was too late, before she started really falling for him. Brian, you know that boy Isaac down the block from us? What you mean, Issa? With all them Jordans? Of course I know him. That boy's got eyes on him in all directions. Brian leaned in closer. What about him? Nicola rolled her eyes. You know his mama? Brian's eyes broadcast his humor before he could even begin to deliver his jokes. He sat up proper, wiped his hands clean on his napkin, and took Nicola's one free hand in both of his and said, Now you listen here, beautiful. You ain't got to worry like that. I ain't going for no MILFs. Is she a MILF? I only got eyes for you. He fluttered his eyelashes like an old school cartoon character. Brian! Nicola was all smiles as she shook his hand away with a 2-beat shake matching the syllables of his name. I'm talking about her business. She is dumpling mama. Those dumplings are kicking. That's Issa's mommy? You think he'll give us some hookups? What? No, I don't know, Brian. That's not my point. My point is Issa, whatever, can afford the Jordans you desperately seek because of his family's poor people food. You got to think differently about the values you can bring to the world just being you. It was Nicola's turn to wipe her hands clean and place them over Brian's. His head was down, and she knew she had finally broken through his barriers of humor and bravado. I ain't you, Nick, or Issa. I ain't as smart, ain't as polished. My family is poor. Nicholas squeezed his hands tight to stop him. Your family is amazing. You are amazing. Poor people food is exotic and expansive once introduced to a new culture who know nothing about where it comes from. Nothing has to change about it. Nothing fancy added. Keep it as pure and true to its roots as if it were served to a hungry family scraping together their meal to make it to another day. You can do exactly the same thing with poor people, don't you think? Brian looked up, no longer sad or bemused. Now he was stoic, like his whole unknowable experience of poverty came to rest in the corner of his eyes. Nicholas sensed he had so much more wisdom than he ever let show. No, Nicola, I don't think that's how it goes at all. I think when you do that with poor people, they get eaten alive. And that's it. So you can head on over to storyhoarder.substack.com to leave a comment if you like, or just to check out the next story that comes or the story after that. It's a website where all the stories are populate and live, so you can go visit and read as they come along. Or, like I said, it could also be a newsletter that you subscribe to. This is the cool sort of flexibility of Substack that I like. Anyone who wants to make sure they never miss anything can subscribe, and it goes straight to your inbox. Otherwise, it just always lives on the website. So I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend for anybody that is celebrating, and I hope this was a fun little diversion, a little bit of fiction for all you writers out there. You know, we're all in it, creating all the time, and it is fun to share. So that is my share for the week. I will be back next week with more of the Happy Campers Club interviews. We got some announcements of books coming out from our writers. It's really exciting, so keep tuning in. And if you like the Stop Writing Alone podcast and you're looking to give a gift, why not write a review, share it with a friend, or just, I don't know, tell people about it. Stop writing alone. Have a wonderful weekend. And again, happy writing. I will talk to you next week, which at that point, NaNoWriMo will be completed. So for all my Rhymos out there, best of luck to you, finishing strong this week and ending on a high by November 30th. Good luck. Happy writing.